You will not believe this. We're back again here on Monday at 2 o'clock, and we'll be here for the next hour. And we hope to bring a program that will rival the program that we did last week. We had a lot of compliments on the program we did last week. And anytime that we get more than a few phone calls and the people are saying good things about it, our energy goes up, and we try to top what we did the week before. If we do not do that in this program today, you don't need, you don't need to call us. But we do appreciate the comments you make, and we do take those comments seriously. I do want to say that we're kind of given the platforms we're on right now. These scholars, there's no way in the world that they're not, aware that we're out here, because we're out here and we're on the same platforms they're on. And the mere fact they're so quiet, I can't flush them out to come out and defend some of the things they say. I look at them. I have to tell you, I look at them as television scholars. They say these things on television. And if they say those things that say on television, they say it here, it's not going to fly quite as well here and as it goes on TV. But there's some things they're saying you can't say those things. But anyway, on television, I guess you can do it because it's another medium. But I think that the medium right now, is really the serious medium. It's not the print medium. It's not the cable news and all those networks. They've already discredited themselves. The ones right now, you take Jimmy Dore's program, and and the Cadillac of all of them right now is Tucker Carlson's show. I had to post. Carson did a 2 hour plus program on the real events that occurred on January the 6th. We're talking about January the 6th, 2021, when they claimed there was an insurrection. If that were the case, it was the first time we had an insurrection where there were no weapons. So he brought it to the government is spending 45, how many billions of dollars that they sent on defense over Ukraine, and then give Ukraine $100 and some billion for their defense. You can imagine what they're spending on the defense of the United States. You're not going anywhere to create an insurrection, overthrow anything with the kind of armaments that they're able to give to another country, less known the armaments you have here. And you're going to go there and create an insurrection, and you don't have any arms. Carson does a program. You need to watch it. It's very long, and I think it's something more in the neighborhood of more than 2 hours. It's well worth watching if you have the time. And given the fact that you have a chance to speed it up and get to some of the other parts of it, if there are segments of it that are not really pricking your interest, you can always, upgrade it to the next segment, given you can do it on your computer. But it's well worth watching. And what Tucker Carlson is doing in this segment is he's showing that there was a pipe bombing in two different locations. There were two different places where pipe bombs were put in place in Washington on that day, and those pipe bombs were scheduled to go off at 1 o'clock. Now, Carson pointed out, and I want to commend Carson again. He's really Carson's a lot like Mike Wallace. This was the real journalist. Mike Wallace was one of the commentators on 60 Minutes. He made that program go, by the way, because people knew that when they had him as part of that network, that program, they knew that he would do something that was very incisive and calling it right down the middle and not taking sides. But wherever the evidence led, this man was a real journalist. We don't have those kind of journalists now. Certainly not the mainstream journalists. You don't have any of them on MSNBC, and I'm beginning to think you don't have very many of them on Fox Network, which is changing its colors. Because I can tell you in the background, I know what's going on there. In the background, they got the same person that stepped down in 2018, Paul Ryan. You need to pay more attention to this guy. He's in the background over there at Fox right now, and he's over there changing the whole dynamics at Fox. They don't cover anything. All of those rallies they used to cover in 2016 because it's good copy. It brought a lot of viewers to the program, to the network, and things like that. They don't cover any of those massive rallies that Trump has now, and that's for a reason. That this is Paul Ryan in the background playing the same politics at Fox. We stepped down with 30 some odd other members of the House and turned the House over to the Democratic Party in 2018, the midterm election. You didn't see this, but that's what was going on. They turned the House over to the Democrats and then set Donald Trump up for impeachment. And when that didn't work out, the first impeachment having started on August the 20th, right after the first impeachment fell through on the 20th of August. And then soon after the failure of the first impeachment to bring about conviction, then we had the coronavirus, the COVID virus coming in as an alternative approach to do the same thing that the impeachment was intended to do, which was to, in fact, put the real insurrection down. The real insurrection is, by the way, the MAGA movement. Make America Great Again. They don't intend to let that movement go anywhere. And that's what you're seeing right now with all these bottlenecks they're throwing in the way of Donald Trump and the MAGA campaign. They intend to stop this movement. And there was a guy from the Congress actually saying that. But Tucker Carlson, I have to commend you. You are shining a light on a lot of things in this country, and we need to pay attention to all the broadcasts you're putting on another network. I think if they had to do it all over again, they would roll back the time period and put Carson back on Fox, because at least they had a little bit of control under the FCC regulations. And now that he's unleashed, Carson's out there now doing 2-hour programs, and you have more time to expand upon the themes. And they had this one guy, this was on the program he did on the 16th, and they had this one guy from Revolver News, I think it is, and they've been doing a lot of research on what really happened on January the 6th. I have the magazine that was put out by Epic Times. That's a very good news source also, and they have a magazine they put out on January the 6th. And it is nothing like what they're reporting on the news. But Carson, I have to give you a lot of credit, because the program you did on the 16th of this month was raising the question of those pipe bombs that were planted in 2 different parts of the nation's capital. And he showed a video of where there was this guy in the hood wearing a hoodie and glasses and so on, and you could barely make out his features. But they're not even interested in trying to find out who this guy was. And that is quite interesting, because they've done recognition kind of technology to identify the persons that were in Washington that day and that were in that area during that demonstration they had on January the 6th. And they're saying that of the 1,200 they've arrested so far, they're saying there's another 1,000 that they're looking for right now, because they plan to shut this movement down. Now you have to understand what they're doing here.
How about the House voting to ban TikTok now? Just yesterday, the past couple of days, the House vote to ban TikTok. I called Kildee's office about that. I don't want to tie up too much time on that.
No,
But,
go ahead.
Anyway, I called them and I said, thanks. The only thing the politician can actually have bipartisanship on is when they're taking something, taking our rights from us and our money.
That's
and
right.
I said, I told the person who works for Kildee,
Mhm.
I'm glad he's not seeking re-election, but I always thought his family was perverted and weird, and I never liked them. And I thought and I said, and I expect probably a visit from the Secret Service because we are criticizing you and we can't do that. But I can't stand it. I'm sick of them. I would rather go to prison and fight that way and be a martyr, I guess, because I'm sick of these people doing whatever the hell they want to us. And we're just supposed to sit there. I hope the Senate knocks it down, but I doubt it. Did you look how many people, both Republicans and Democrats, voted to ban TikTok? All the other stuff, they're really crucial in this country, but they're trying to ban TikTok. Well, China's spying on us. Well, how is it? You guys are just trading information back and forth anyway, because the NSA and all the other organizations already done it to the Americans. But anyway, this is all part of the same thing. It's part of the judicial corruption and everything else going on.
It is. They say that they will. They will never forgive Donald Trump for having defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016. That's not really why they're after him. They're angry with Donald Trump. Well, that's part of it too, that he wasn't supposed to win the election. But what really they are mad about is that by the insurgency of the MAGA movement, Donald Trump flushed them to come out of the woodwork and come out of hiding, come out of the shadows, and identify their presence. And now we know that the quote unquote deep state, as they're called, but that only is talking about the permanent, permanent Washington, which is not really the elected officials. They are part of the deep state, but there's also this bureaucracy that is permanent Washington does not have to yield to the voters every 2 years in terms of having any change in the personnel, because the voters go to the polls. Not that they're doing anything with the vote, because it should not be a 96% recidivism rate among the politicians, given how they govern the country, is what John is talking about. There's no way in the world, given the report card of our politicians, that they should have a rate of recidivism where it is 96% of the people running for re-election get reelected, because we don't look at governance and what they've done over the course of their career. In fact, given how they govern the country, quite frankly, there should not be any career politicians in Washington, because look what they've done over the course of their career, run the country completely into the ground. But you need to pay attention to Tucker Carlson, because Carlson's doing some great work for this nation. And it'd be interesting to see how his legacy plays out over time and what history will say about him, because he is doing work that no one else out there is doing. And you need to watch this one video that he put out 2 days ago, because that video shows what really happened on January 6th, 2021, and what the intentions were. Because if those two bombs planted, which were scheduled to go off, the meter stopped at 20 minutes before 1 o'clock. But why would they have been set up to go off in 20 minutes in Washington? People talking about this. The people met in Washington to stop the Congress from going forward and counting the ballots. But if you look at the timing of those bombs that had been planted, and they're going off at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock was a time when they were supposed to be listening to the objections to the votes that had been given to the Congress to, in fact, read out. And there were objections on the floor. And that's when the cancellations were occurring, because they did not want to have those objections listened to on the floor of the Congress, because those were concrete objections that had tremendous merit to it, because a lot of the states had changed their requirements for the vote, and by changing it without the legislature, in fact, being involved in the change, that was a violation of Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution, where you have the Section 2, Clause 1, Verse 2 of the Constitution, where the legislative branch chooses the electors by the process they set up and put in motion. And when it was not done that way, it was a violation of the Constitution in the Article 2 violation. And that was being challenged, and they could not have answered that challenge because it was changed without the approval of the legislative branch of the government. See, the states are supposed to be were supposed to be in charge of that. And when that was taken out of their hands, and then they're doing something other to change the way in which the votes were to, in fact, be administered, then that violation right there would have remanded those vote totals back to those states that were involved in that violation, and they stopped that by the hoorah that began to take place on January the 6th, because once the idea was we got an insurrection, then all the members of the Congress were able to hide behind this so-called, it's really a fedsurrection. And they were able to hide behind it, cancel out the objections, and go forward with counting the votes as it was in fact determined. Now, I know you think that this was not well thought out and planned, and you don't think that they had these Republican players going along with it. But you can go back and look at the evidence and see that there was no opposition to what they were doing, because those persons, see, this is another part. Donald Trump is a threat to both political parties. But here's a caveat in that, and that is he's less of a threat to the Republican Party than to the Democratic Party, because he's running as a Republican, but they don't want him in there either. They don't want him in the Republican Party either. And that's why they went along with this. And look at what his vice president did, Michael Pence, who's being applauded for his handling of that affair on that day. Now, you didn't see them skipping back. What was that word used by the press secretary of Biden? Circling back. You didn't see them circling back to fix the role of the vice president in counting the votes that have been submitted to the Congress for them to count the electoral votes in front of both the House and the Senate, so as to have validation the votes are in fact fairly counted from each of the states that submit their votes based upon going through the protocols of Article 2. And by the objection being on the floor, they were able to cancel that. Now, they try to act like Mike Pence did his job that day, but you didn't see him circling back to later on to go back quietly now, because I'm watching all of this. And that what they did was they went back to make the vice president's role in the future ceremonial. But you see, it was not ceremonial on that day. You see what was happening, what they did in the future, trying to cover their footsteps. They went back to change the law so that whatever is submitted in the future, which tells me a lot about what they are planning as they go forward, is that the votes that are submitted to the Congress from the respective states, regardless of how those votes have been acquired, whether they violate Article 2 or not, in terms of the legislative branch being over the way the votes are to be counted, the rules and that's set by the state legislature, that's ordained by Article 2 of the Constitution. Take my word for that. By them making the vice president role in the votes that's now being placed before the Congress, unlike it was when Pence did not do his job, in the future, by him doing what he did, he'll be doing his job, because his job would just be open ballots, open up the the balloting that's been submitted, count the votes, certified, and then it's a done deal. That's not the role it was on the day that it was to be submitted on January the 6th, 2021. It's what Pence was supposed to do, based upon the Electoral Act of 1887, was to take the objections, and if they have an objection in both the House and the Senate, that overrides the certification and puts it on pause until the objections are heard. But then the stampeding that occurred there is what suspended the process, as if you can suspend the law because of some crisis that comes up. Let me tell you something. If you have a constitutional mandate, I don't care what takes place. We've had elections that went on during times of war, because you don't suspend the Constitution because of the crisis. The law is the law regardless to the crisis. And you still have to go forward with the election. You cannot suspend the elections in this country. And what they did was, in fact, do a lot of things that were unconstitutional. If you notice that they'll ask the question, is there any objection to, this is what they would normally do, is there any objection to the submission of the ballots? And a person will, if there is an objection, stand up. Then the vice president will ask, is the objection in writing? Well, it's in writing. Then the next question is there a person in the other body that in fact also is objecting to the way in which the balloting was taking place, based upon Article 2. And they had that. If you remember, Ted Cruz seconded the objection. It was objection raised in the House. It doesn't matter which one of the bodies raised it first, but when the objection was raised in the House, they asked, is it in writing? It was in writing. Then they asked, is there a second to the objection in the Senate? And then Cruz stood up, and of course, he was targeted thereafter. He's a bad guy, but Mike Pence, who violated the law, is a good guy, which shows you how twisted things are in Washington. They had an objection, but then after the breakdown of order in the insurrection, which is what this was, because Carson's raising this question, and I raised it myself a couple of times here in this program. It's interesting that we have not had any of anybody interested in looking at the role that Ray Epps played. And the question that's got to be raised, and Tucker Carlson did a good job of raising it once again, is who is Ray Epps, and why is Ray Epps roaming free when he's the one that was saying as early as on January the 5th, we must go into the building, and was repeating that repeatedly out there on January the 6th, motivating the people and inspiring them to go into the building, which they are now saying that was a violation going to the building, although it is the people's building to go into the building, you're paying for it. And if you're not going there to do any destructive work, I don't see how you can be claiming that you were in there doing insurrection, particularly when you waved inside the building, which the videos show. Let me ask you this. Since Tucker Carlson raised this, and it's been raised before, why don't we have those videos, 40,000 hours of videos to show what really happened on January 6th? I know why why we don't have the videos. I'm just raising it rhetorically. The reason why you don't have the videos is because it doesn't verify the narrative they put out there. The validation of what really happened is that this was not what they say it was. The persons that were inside that building, the person by the name of Jacob Chansley, for an example, they're opening. The videos are very clear. They're opening doors for this guy. There's some doors that the keys wouldn't open. They were going to show him some locked doors and let him go into those rooms, and they were escorting him throughout the building. They waved them into the building, first of all, on the other side, not the side where they have the other. See, there are two different things going on here. One is the things going outside, and then the other thing is that they're letting people inside the building to make it looked like there was a mobilized effort both on the outside and inside to take over the apparatus of the government so that the certification of the ballot could not go on. They're there to certify the balloting if the balloting, in fact, passed the smell test based upon passing the law in Article 2 and also passing the law, as a matter of fact, of what was passed in 1887 in the Electoral Vote Count Act. I'm very much aware of that act. I've read it very carefully, and that was a violation there. That vote should not have gone forward until those objections were heard. But the so-called insurrection, which is their name for it, but nobody's ever been charged with it, and they won't play this part where Donald Trump says peacefully and patriotically, because they have the right to be in Washington, unless you're telling me that because they have an objection, you cannot express the objection by going to the seat of the government, the seat of power of the government, and object in front of the people who are making the decisions. If you can't do that, then what's the purpose of having a First Amendment? If you can only object in your closet, this is unraveling, and Carson is staying on this, and some others, because this is going to be, if the Republican Party stands up, it can't just be Jordan and Kramer and some of the others, Matt Gaetz and some of the people, this one Higginson and some of the others. It should be the whole Republican Party standing up if that's the stick that they want to use, because we got to clear up what happened January the 6th. And none of them, they're not standing up as a party because they're standing with the Democratic Party is what it amounts to. That's what's really going on.
Uniparty. Yeah.
Uniparty. That's what we have in Washington.
Because they're both. I mean, let's face it. It's like the pro wrestling scenario. They trash talk each other in the ring. They beat each other with chairs. But when you see them before and after, all partying together in the same limo. That's all these people are. And I mean, you got people like Molly Maitland and James Carville who are married. One's supposed to be the Republican spin doctor. The other one's a Democrat spin. All they're in, it's a game. They're playing us against the middle. They laugh their asses off at us, and they're not nice people. They're well paid.
Is that a true statement? This stuff has been exposed. If the networks would do their job, we could you're talking about taking back the country. The country's been co-opted. There's been a hostile takeover of the country by the bureaucrats. The deep state, the permanent Washington has taken over the instruments of power in this country. And that's why as I said earlier, that's why they really are mad at Donald Trump, because Donald Trump made them come out of the woodwork to expose that the deep state is in fact in place here. But that's you can use different words at different time periods. But that really is what Eisenhower was talking about on the 17th of January, 1961. 3 days before Eisenhower was stepping down, and he made a speech before the nation, and that's when he made this comment about the military. Everybody can remember one part of what he said, but he said there is a budging apparatus that's beginning to develop in this country that's posing a threat to the democratic process, and he said it is the military industrial complex. We all can remember that part of it. What he was doing here was saying there is a phenomenon that we have not seen before, but it's developing, and he should know it developed in his administration. It started under Truman, but it's began to develop under the administration that succeeded Truman, and that was Dwight Eisenhower. And they had a lot of things going on under Eisenhower. Eisenhower was a fairly honest president, but he was not a very good administrator, and he was new to the, this man was a military hero in World War II, and that's what he ran him. They could have run him as a Republican, run him as a Democrat. He still would have won because of the status he came back to the country with after his role in World War II. Patton was no longer mobile because some things that happened there. I don't want to go into it here, but some things happened there, and now Patton was immobilized, paralyzed, and that some don't get me started on that.
Yeah, literally. I mean, he wasn't just because of political movements. He was paralyzed in the hospital.
Yeah,
he was dying.
Yeah,
So.
tell me about it. You see, things that were not suspicious then, we look back at it now with a more jaundiced eye because of what has happened since the time period. The innocence, the country's innocence was taken from them in 1963. A lot of things jumped off before that, differently seen and viewed differently. And after 1963, then a lot of things that were being viewed now that would have been viewed differently if that had not occurred. But after the Kennedy assassination occurred, and then they lied about what really went on in Dallas, it raised a lot of questions about a lot of other stuff that was going on that we had questions about. But why would you really go into any depth about the question that you were doing? But now that that happened, and we saw that what they claimed went on there could not have happened then, of course, we began to open up a lot of the floodgates will open up, and all the questions we had now about things that we kind of had a view that something doesn't sound right, doesn't pass the smell test. You began to go back and say, wait a minute, I had some questions about that, but it didn't seem like it played into the field of understandings. And now that this happened, it made people go back. I go back now and look at the election 1948. I don't think Truman won the election 1948. I think Dewey won. But but there was some suspicions here. But it's like it's the age of innocence of America. We were watching I Love Lucy and all that stuff, and later on watching Get Smart. A lot of programs that they put on TV, Ozzie and Harriet, all the stuff showing us a different America than what was going on in the political arena. We thought that was America. And so, but now that the thing given situation now is to question everything. And that's why I think Tucker Carlson is one of the great persons in this country right now. This man is absolutely fearless.
I do think you made a valid point though about Fox fired him. Now he's on the internet, which has got fewer restrictions, but they're aiming to get more restrictions with the movement about banning TikTok because these a-holes in Washington be damned. They don't want us to be informed. They want us to be spoon fed. Anyway, Tucker Carlson is like a person speaking out, and he's got more leverage being where he's at now than he did with Fox, which is a media corporation and ridiculously tied to all these other insiders. And but the thing is, the outsider journalist is up against this though. See, legally, we have the right to free press, but also we don't have the free press doesn't have any any legal authority to get people to speak like like they would in a court. They can't summon them and stuff. So basically they can just avoid their questions or not to do an interview or just be very evasive in questioning. So, I'm not suggesting that first, the press should be given those kind of powers. Because right now, especially, we see what they're capable of being. They're easily co-opted. And
they actually are shackling themselves. We got the First Amendment, but if you're not going to use it, it's like you don't have the First Amendment. You have freedom of the press, but if the press does not, in fact, use the freedoms it has under the constitutional mandate, that's in the very First Amendment of the Constitution. That's how framers were so stricken by the need for protections. I mean, you have the inalienable right to freedom of speech, but the framers felt so strongly about it that they put it into the institutional fabric of the country and put it at the very, very beginning of what is called, erroneously in my view, the Bill of Rights. But it's there. So, but if you don't use it, if Tucker Carlson's voice out there crying out in the wilderness that it be used and nobody else is using it, it's like you don't have it, and many of them are not interested in doing it.
Or like every level. I mean, you see the cop audit videos. every time you bring up the First Amendment, they insist you have to be licensed to exercise your First Amendment rights. It's like, and they know better. They've been trained better. I sat in classrooms with these people who become cops. At least the classrooms I'm sitting, the instructor covered what the First Amendment meant. But no. Pelosi started it with saying, basically insisting that people who have a $5 blog shouldn't be considered an appropriate news source. It's got to be somebody they sit there and have cocktails with.
Right.
And that's, I mean, so every level of the bureaucrats and the enforcers have a contempt for the rights. But once the focus is turned on them, they are going to use the same constitutional guarantees you and I have and cling to. They're going to throw them in there. They're going to throw them rapidly in your face because they don't want to have, they think they know that those are supposed to be in place for everybody, but they don't want you to know that. And all levels of bureaucrats, cops, they all hate people being informed of their rights.
Yeah, and to be independent of the people who are trying to control every fabric of American life, every facet of American life. They want to be in control of that. And I wonder sometimes if they had known that Carson would go out here and become a lightning rod with a certain amount of independence, because he's looking around for the network he would in fact join on to. I thought he might go over to Newsmax, since there was also a powerhouse on the right, and I thought he might go over there, as some of the others have done since they've left Fox. But no, he wanted more leverage than that, and he wanted a larger format that allows him to expand upon, how you're restricted, on those programs, you're restricted to your hour program is restricted 39 minutes of actual programming. The other 21 minutes is really of the hour program is really advertising. So 39 minutes of the actual program, and then 21 minutes to pay for it. Through the advertisements they have. That's why it takes so many breaks and so on. But now that I wonder, given that Carson's out here as a loose cannon, if they could have foreseen they'd be out here able to. You got TCN now, Tucker Carlson Network. They certainly didn't see that. They didn't see that coming, and now the man's doing 2 hour programs. And he can be more expansive in opening things up and showing in more detail what's going on. The man's a lightning rod out there. And if I wonder what would happen if they could have seen what role this man is playing right now in informing the American people about some very serious matters here about what's going on. If they would have, in fact, because Carson was number one over there with Fox. He was bringing. By leading into, he was the 8 o'clock program. He's in the slot that Jesse Waters is in right now. And they moved up Laura Ingraham, who used to be at 10 after they shook up the lineup. She used to come on at 10 after Sean Handy's program. Now she's at 7, and then Waters is 8, Handy is 9, and then Gutfield is 10. They have to shake the lineup up because I tell you why. They didn't have this the fall off. You don't start with the same numbers that Carson had. So when you have the lesser numbers and fall off as such, then the fall off is much more of a problem, because your ratings is how you charge your advertisers for the advertising minute, by how many viewers you can bring to the advertiser's product. And the fall off is more consequential now because they don't have the numbers they once had when Carson was there. Carson was bringing in regularly 2 million viewers, regularly doing that. But I wonder what they would do if they could have foreseen they'd be out there as a lightning rod with independence and more time he can put on interviews. He's doing a more voluminous type of interview than is being done by Mark Levine. Mark Levine has a different format in his program. He does 2 guests in his program rather than going through a number of guests and everybody's out here cackling and you can't get anything done, can't learn anything because it's jumping around so much. He has one guest on in one part of the show, another guest on the other part of the show, and does 2 different guests each program. He can do a little of that. Carson doing more than that. Carson's doing 2-hour segments, and this man's a lightning rod. And he's raised a question here and put a challenge out to the Republican Party. I'll be watching. I know you'll be watching as well to see if they go up to the plate and accept the challenge of looking into why has the person that planted those pipe bombs, which they got him on tape, and I saw the angle of it I hadn't seen before, and that's the angle from a different camera that's out there. That camera catches that person planting those pipe bombs, but there's a total disinterest in it. Now the Republican Party, that's what Tucker Carlson has thrown in your lap. Why aren't you interested in finding out who that is? Because if we can find out what that's about, it blows the whole top off of the January 6th narrative, although the narrative never did work. If the narrative was in fact supported by the video, you have those videos out by now, but you don't have the 40,000 hours of video because it does not support the narrative. There's no insurrection on January the 6th. You can't insurrect against a government with that much firepower, and you go in there with your fingernails. This is not that kind. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight. This is not a gunfight. This is a military fight, and they showed you they didn't want to do this, but because the question had been raised about the people going to Washington on January the 6th, telling them we don't believe you, we don't believe the election was fair, we don't think Donald Trump lost the election, and they went there to protest it. And then when they had the inauguration, they brought 26,000 people in the nation's capital and put a military force in the capital of this country to stand down anyone who dared come back and raise an objection to what they were doing. That's what the military was there for, to put down any questions that were being raised. And they dared anyone to come into Washington on that day to raise any of the objections. And the First Amendment, get out of here with that. That was the message they were giving. And they stayed in Washington, put barbed wire fences up, and stayed in Washington, had more people unable to go to the Capitol than they have coming into the country. The barbed wire they have in Washington to keep people out, they're taking down the barbed wire in Texas because they don't want them keeping these immigrants out. That's another part of the strategy they have here, because the people do not believe in these government institutions anymore, and for a good reason, because they discredit themselves. Okay, I wanted to say also here, and what I really wanted to get into today, quite frankly, more so than last week, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the court system, because the framers, when you go read the Federalist Papers, and the last, starting with 78, I think Hamilton closes out the Federalist Paper because 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, and 83. Yeah, those six. All of those are written by Hamilton. And 84 and 85 is a summary of the Federalist Papers. But Hamilton deals with, finally they get around to looking at the court. Now I want to read something to you here because the courts were considered to be the weakest of the three branches of government. And I want to read something to you from the original Constitution. And I'm going to make a claim here that you can add things to the Constitution, and just because you place it in there, it does not make that. I don't know if scholars are going to go along with me on this. But you can add things to the Constitution that would be unconstitutional if you add to it. And I'm going to tell these scholars this. They're trying to quote Section 3 of the 14th Amendment as a disqualifier if they can pin insurrection on Donald Trump, which they can't do based upon the evidence, but if they do that by being extra legal, which is what they're doing anyway with, you saw it with this horrible judge they have in New York, Arthur Ingeron, who fined Trump $355 million for a non-crime. This is a complete outrage. But here's the third rail of government that was determined to be the weakest of the three branches of government. I mean, Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, and then Article 3 sets up the judicial branch of government. Let me read something to you from the setting that up. Let me read Article 3, Section 1 of the Constitution, if I can find it here. I want you to listen to this very carefully. I want you to listen to this word, inferior. The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. It doesn't even name the inferior courts, but what I'm telling you is that if the Supreme Court cannot hear a case against the President of the United States, then the inferior courts can't do it either. Without satisfying certain preconditions in the Constitution. I have to say that also. Now, nobody's saying that, but that's the truth. Now, here's where Trump's lawyers made a mistake. It's a very egregious mistake, and they went down a couple of lanes that should not have gone down. They should never have claimed that the president has presidential immunity. Partially, that is in the domain of the argument to be made, but that's not the argument to be made. There is a caveat to the president being brought before any tribunal, but it's not an immunity. It's a constitutional process, because the president is not a civil office holder. He's the president of the United States, through which the whole constituency of the country is embodied in the presidential office. Through another office, is that true? But it's true in his office or her office when we have a female president. So but the framers were infinitely wise in this regard. They recognize that on the one hand, the president has this authority over the federal government. At the same time, they do not want to have any office holder take license over the commands, and these are commands in the Constitution of the United States. The word shall is a commanding term. Shall do this, shall do that. You shall come in, you shall do X, Y, and Z. These are not suggestions. And so the Constitution speaks in the voice of shall. Therefore, when the President of the United States is carrying out a constitutional mandate, let me read it to you. Let me read the mandate to you. Article 2, Section 1. Let me read this to you here. About what it says about the president shall, it's about the executive branch of government. The executive authority shall be vested in the President of the United States, is what it says. Okay, here's the wording. The executive power shall be, not should be, shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. So all those persons contending that the president did not check with somebody to make sure that he was in fact doing the right thing by classifying documents and so on and so forth, go read the language. The president does not have to go through a formal process to classify or declassify. It's classified, declassified by his handling of the documents. That's a fact, and you scholars pay attention to this, because there, by the Constitution saying, and I'm reading it from the document, I'm not making this up, this is exactly what the reading of it. The executive power shall be, it doesn't say shall be shared, it says shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. So now all we have to do is see then if the classification of documents is an executive function of the government. Isn't that true? We have to see if the ordering of certain documents to be classified, is that an executive function of the government, or is it to give it to the legislative branch of government with all of the persons there that have to agree upon the classification, which would create a tremendous amount of chaos? The question is, in which of the three bodies of the federal government that are segmented by Articles 1, 2, and 3, which of those, in fact, would be the one that's entrusted with the classification of documents of the country? Which of the three branches of government you think? If you say that it's the executive branch, then I want to read this again to you, and that is the executive power. That's not should be or should be shared. It says the executive power shall be vested in the President of the United States. I can see to have her. This country is so off the mark. It could not have even been viewed by the framers being this far off kilter. They're using the word shall here, and they act like the word shall can be dismissed to be should, as if they have it's wiggle room here. There's no wiggle room here. Shall is a commanding term. It says it goes on this way, is this way of the highway. And so her says that he's not going to find any fault with Biden, because Biden did not follow this. Biden was not even president. Biden is a senator and has classified documents. He doesn't say anything about the senators in Article 2. And yet he has classified documents. They don't charge him, but the person that the Constitution authorizes to have the classification authority, they want to make a charge of this person. And then her exonerates him because he says, well, he's not capable of knowing what he's doing, so therefore they can't bring about any institutionalizations of principles upon his handling of his office, because he's not really responsible for it, because they're saying the man is, in fact, see now, if he can run the country and you don't have a problem with him being responsible for being over the nuclear codes of this country, you cannot then claim that he's not capable of answering for the charge. They had documents he did not supposed to have, because those documents are in the purview of the president. If it's not declassified by the president, they're not declassified, and no one else can play that role. You can't play the role as a senator. That's not the intention. That's the executive function of the government, and the president does not have to get any authority to carry out what is mandated to him in Article 2 of the Constitution. You can't suspend it like that. I'm telling you, scholars, that can't be. You need to raise this question. That can't go on. and this idea of some form of process the president has to go through in order to declassify a document says who? Where is that said in the document? Is declassified by the president's energy toward the document. If he waves it in front of a person who is in his office and says this and that, by him doing that, it's declassified at that point. Do you scholars agree with that? I don't need you to agree with it. I'm telling you that's the law. The president declassifies by his energy toward the document. That's enough to declassify the document. Why? Because he's the single office holder in the executive branch of government. He is the executive branch of government. He doesn't have to get permission from the other body. Now, I was saying earlier, and this is a very important point here, is that Trump's lawyers made a mistake here. They argued that Trump had presidential immunity. And they opened up this silly judge who then said, well, if he has presidential immunity, if he goes out there and kills somebody, then does that give him immunity from having killed somebody? Let me answer that question. Because that's a stupid question to raise, as if the president gonna go out there and kill somebody. Now if you worry about somebody killing somebody, worry about Michael Byrd killing Ashley Babbitt. Let's get to that trial, killing this woman in cold blood, and there's no interest in investigating this guy that is known to be a gunslinger. Should not even been on the force at that point. The man left his gun in a position. I mean, you start losing your keys in some jobs, and you misplace your keys, they set you down. You're that irresponsible. They can't trust you with anything. Keys to the building, keys to the bank. You got to get out of here. This man left his gun. And has a history of that kind of behavior. And then on the 6th of January, that's another thing Tucker Carlson points out, they try to act like they were, Jeffrey said this other day, 5 police officers were in fact killed on January the 6th. And they keep repeating this lie. The only person that died on January the 6th by gunfire and so on and so forth was Ashley Babbitt. Nobody was beaten down with a what was that kind of? They used some kind of a can they're supposed to use to bash a person. The only person that died from any violence that day was Ashley Babbitt that died. Now somebody got crushed in that, but they're still lying about it. Is what I'm saying. Now here's what needs to happen. Donald Trump, the chance of bringing him to trial for anything that he did while he was president, that time has passed. And I'll tell you why. Because in order for this to be now brought to a court, the framers knew that if the president was in fact in office and did things that were not palatable to the other branches of the government, they can in fact wait him out and get him after he stepped down. So on the one hand, you can't argue he has presidential immunity. On the other hand, you cannot remove the protections from the president making decisions when he's president and have a person that's going against him politically once he steps down. So what they did here in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7, what they did was they in fact put in place a certain protocol you have to go through in order to do anything later once he leaves office to make it so he's not vulnerable to the politics. And so in Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7, what they needed to have done is bring about the impeachment of the president and then the conviction, and then through that, removing the hedge from around the president, the separation of powers from around him that protects the president, and then they reduce him down to a civilian level, and then they could have charged the president with what they're saying. Can't do it now. Didn't do that when he was the president of the United States. That's what I wanted to get across. I didn't cover it last week, but I wanted to cover that. That's the truth and the whole truth about how this process plays out at this point. All the things they're doing now in the court against Donald Trump, what he did as president, all it's unconstitutional. Cannot do it. And I hope the lawyers will get back on the right track and argue the constitutionalities that are involved here. But these are constitutional violations, and it should not be it should not be allowed to stand in a court of law. A court of law, there's now people by outlaws. That's what we have now. Arthur Ingram, that's you, and there's also this judge over here that we have in this other quack on the court. These people do not belong in any court anywhere around power. Okay, I got to get out of here. Take my word for it. Carson is the man, and he is doing the job that all of them should be doing. If they would do the job, we could take this country back. It's going to be a much more difficult proposition because they're not doing their job. But we got a job to do also out here, and that job is to be done on November the 5th. Keep that on your calendar. Okay, until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.